Okay, so what is routing? Well, right now we only have one homepage component that pretty much comprises our entire app. But what if we had multiple page components, like an about page or a shop page or a checkout page, that needed to be rendered depending on what URL the user was at? Well, that is what routing seeks to solve. And the routing library we're going to use is called React Router DOM. Now, there are other routing libraries out there for React, but React Router DOM is the most popular and most supported library for routing when it comes to building our applications in React. It's easy to understand, and it follows our component-driven architecture. So let's actually try it out. So how do we use it? Well, first we have to install React Router DOM. And what I'm going to do is I am going to kill our server, and I'm going to yarn add React Router DOM. Now, there is a chance that our libraries for Babel Jest will conflict again, like it did when we first installed Node Sass. And if it does, I'm going to show you how we can fix that issue. So if we run yarn start, yes, so we see that that's an issue. Okay, that's fine. The reason for this is because there are dependencies between the React scripts that's in our Create React app for Babel Jest that is different from the one that is being required from some other version of a library that we installed, right? But this is okay because it looks like the major versions are not in conflict. It's just this minor. It's the 7 versus the 8. So what we can do with yarn is inside of our package JSON, we can add a resolutions property, and we can tell it that we want Babel Jest to always be 24.7.1 no matter what. So now if we reinstall all of our dependencies, we'll see that we're forcing Babel Jest to be 24.7.1. And now we should have no problem starting our application. Awesome. Okay. So let's actually see how to use React Router DOM. Well, first we have to go to our index.js and we have to import in browser router from React Router DOM. And browser router is a component that we're actually going to wrap around our application. And what this component does is it gives our application that's sitting between this component all of the functionality of routing that this library provides. Now, in order for me to show you what React Router does, I'm just going to write a bit of code first because it'll make more sense if you see it. So I'm going to import this component route from React Router DOM. And then I'm just going to make a quick component that renders out a div with an h1 of hats page. And this is just going to represent another page alternative to our homepage right now, called a hats page. So how this route component works is that it's a component that takes a couple arguments. The main ones that I want to focus on are exact, path, and component. Now, component will be the component that we want to render, right? We want the route to render. So for now, let's just use homepage. The path will be a string that's equal to the path itself from the current place in where we're at. So because we're at the very base of our application, right? The URL is gonna, when we put slash, the base URL is just localhost 3000 or like our URL without any additional sub URLs following our URL. So what this means is that when the URL is at the base, right, just slash, then I want to render the home page. So when we're at localhost, I just want to render the home page. Exact is a true or false property. So we either pass true or false. And if you just keep it as this with no equals, then it's equal to true. It means that this path must be exactly slash in order for this component to render, our homepage component to render. If the route, for example, without exact, let's say the URL was localhost 3000 / hats, right? Slash is technically still true. This part of the URL right here is still true. So our homepage will actually still render. So let me show you how that would happen. So let's write another route where our path is hats, and when it's hats, we want to render the hats page. Well, now if we go to our application, if we navigate to hats, we'll see that we have our home page, and then underneath we have our hats page. So without the exact, as long as the path matches, right? As long as it's present, then it will render the home page. But if we make sure that it's exact, then now it won't render the home page unless it's exactly this path of just the slash. Like so. These are pretty much the main things that we need out of our route component. There's a couple others for more nuanced examples that we might explore later in the application, but most of the time it's very easy. You can just go to the React Router DOM quick start documentation and you can see all of the API that you have access to. But this routing is the main one that we're going to utilize. The other component I want to show is the switch component. Now, to use the switch component, we wrap our route components within it. Now, what it does is the moment that a route inside of it finds a match in the path, it does not render anything else but that route. So before, when we went to our hats URL, right, if we remove the exact, if we go to our hats URL, we know that we were matching the slash and the slash hats. But switch will match slash first, and then it will not render anything else after it. So if we look and we go to hats, right, we'll see that we have our home page, but there's no hats page. And the reason for this is because of switch. So the moment switch sees something match the path, right, as long as a route gets rendered, then it just renders that route. It renders nothing else. Now, if we put the exact back, then we will, of course, render our hats page because this home page with the exact path of / never matched at this URL of /hats. And if we go back to our home page, well, we're going to render our home page. So the switch is useful because it gives us more control over our code, right? It allows us to kind of follow a pattern where we know that as long as one route matches, then that's the only thing we're going to render. And that's useful if we don't want to accidentally render multiple components, right? It's just a lot more control that we get from the library. But this switch and this route component, they're the basic components that we're going to use to build out this application. And as we build, of course, we're going to pull in a little bit more and we're going to write some more complex code with React Router DOM. But conceptually, this is what routing is in our project.